Hey everyone, Gill Gross here post-match. Carlos Alcaraz versus Novak Djokovic, Australian Open 2025 quarterfinal. If you're not here for spoilers, click off the video. Novak Djokovic beats Alcaraz in 4 to advance to the semis. And I just want to start off by saying every year that goes by that Djokovic proves that he can play with the best and beat the best just gets more and more and more impressive. And we are past impressive because it was impressive 2 years ago, but not quite as much. And, last year there was that very impressive week that he was able to pull off that salvaged his season and made it a success. And now here, again, hasn't won the Australian Open, but to beat an elite, to show that he still has that, and to beat him in I think a pretty convincing manner, although there were a lot of ebbs and flows in this match. Again, not something that should be taken for granted. It is a spectacular display. Another one from a man who is better at winning tennis matches than anyone who we have ever seen. So I guess what I mean by ebbs and flows, well, the thing that created the ebbs and flows in this match was a Djokovic physical problem that ended up popping up that seemingly was a groin thing. I forget at this point if it's right groin, left groin. I could be wrong, right? Maybe it's hip flexor, maybe it's hamstring, but it was certainly a lower body thing. And when it first happened, it was looking pretty bleak, but I also thought to myself, well, you think back to 2021, Novak hurts his oblique, ends up getting a scan after the tournament. He tore his oblique, ended up winning the title in 2021. 2023, ended up having a tear in his hamstring, fought it out, won the Australian Open in 2023 with the hamstring injury. So a major part of Novak Djokovic's recent Australian Open history is getting through these physical issues. And in that sense, I was thinking, well, I could see this going the way of like, okay, this is bad and this becomes uncompetitive, but I could also see it being very much a contest. And from that medical timeout on, it was Novak Djokovic who was unrelentingly the player at an advantage. So, but in a very kind of complex way. I thought that there were 4 phases to this match. There was pre-medical timeout. There was injury tennis. There was Djokovic normalization. And then there was peak level. So I guess I'll go quickly through all of those, and then we'll hit on some of the more technical details. Pre-medical timeout, this is when my preview was looking fairly accurate. Not the fact that I said Alcaraz in 5. Forget that. Just the way I thought the tennis would go is kind of how the first set went, where, first of all, super nervous start from both. It was almost comical. There is so much tension, and I mean, we feel it watching the match, but they feel it on the court. I mean, it was an ugly start to the match, but then they quickly settled in, as you'd expect. But Djokovic, he was getting tons of free points with his first serve, and he was making fewer early mistakes in the rallies. So he was keeping the error count a little bit more under control compared to Alcaraz. But once the points were developing, Alcaraz was doing all the damage, all of it. Set 1 winners were 13-3. And pre-injury, before it was apparent that anything was wrong, I didn't think Novak's movement looked all that good, especially out to his forehand. It seemed pretty easy for Alcaraz to find damage. The drop shot was undefeated. Every time Carlos hit a drop shot, it won him the point. When Alcaraz got to the net, he won 7 out of 9 points. So just offensively, it was pretty dominating. And the forehand-to-forehand rally, which Djokovic was able to kind of win at the Olympics in some really big spots to end up winning that gold medal match, it seemed like Alcaraz was getting enough width and was sort of winning the battle of weight of shot in that forehand to forehand exchange and kind of winning it every time. So it kind of seemed like things were being played on Alcaraz's racket. He breaks at 4-all, and that is where you have this kind of Djokovic physical issue pop up in this 4-all game. Novak takes a medical timeout. Alcaraz hits 4 unreturned serves, holds at love. First set goes to Carlos. Now we go to phase 2, injury tennis. Well, Novak is being very cautious with his movement. He is not scrambling hard into the corners. And sometimes he's not even really able to position himself properly for balls that are coming even through the middle of the court. So he's moving at about 70% speed here. But immediately, the quality of his shot making increases tenfold. And you go from the first set where he's trying to be solid, but he's a passenger, and Alcaraz is kind of bullying him as soon as the points develop past the serve return, to Novak is flattening it out and picking corners and making aggressive returns and continuing to get a lot of purchase out of his first serve. Plus, Alcaraz lets him do it a little bit. Alcaraz loses the violence from the back of the court. He certainly pulls back the ground stroke speed. And overall, in terms of his intensity, he lost the fury at this point. He almost kind of went down a little bit to Djokovic's vibe on the other side of the court, which was look, I'm competing here, but physically I'm not bringing a ton of intensity anymore, and I'm really just trying to rely on kind of instant offense to get me through this. And frankly, Alcaraz's level dropped at this point because not only did he lose the fury, but it's not like he just got, super buttoned up and made Djokovic start, made Djokovic earn everything and made every return. Like, it wasn't defensive and it wasn't offensive from Alcaraz. It was just a dip. While Novak's shot making started to get really, really clean. And Djokovic, ultimately breaks at love at 4-5 to win the set by landing some really big aggressive returns. Alcaraz makes like a super neutral backhand error to start that game. And it's one of those errors that kind of happen throughout the set where you're like, okay, that just can't really happen. Like, you're playing a guy who's not moving well. Don't miss a neutral ball, especially that you're not even attacking. So Djokovic was able to kind of bully Alcaraz's serve with big returns, dictate behind his first serve, and just stay on offense. And we've seen it before from Novak, but he did it here. He won the set without defending and without really moving. So that's injury tennis. Second set, 6-4 for Djokovic. Then I think come the start of the third set, you have a normalization. The movement, not suddenly, but it just, you can start to see it happen incrementally. And I do think it was kind of a quick process of getting back up to speed. It comes back, and he's making neutralizing returns consistently, and he starts actually pulling back the aggression a little bit. He's defending well, and the clean ball striking remains for the most part, so the depth is good. The ground stroke pace is good. And Carlos is just not hanging in these points. He is super erratic in this third set, and there is simply no replacement for consistency. You just can't replace it. You got to make the balls in the court, and Djokovic was doing that at a way higher level than Alcaraz, and I do think frustration and confusion set in because it was disorienting for Carlos. It was disorienting, one, that he lost the second set with the guy, with his opponent going 70% speed, right? That was a little bit of a shock to the system. And then suddenly in the third set, the way Novak was playing suddenly even also kind of changed. So it was, I think, a mental whirlwind for Alcaraz. And Novak, again, he takes the the third set largely based on just being less mistake prone. That was one of the big, and again, we'll get into some of the constant details tactically that did occur throughout the match, but it was really about being less mistake prone and making the returns, and also just being willing to extend some of these points and defend for the first time since early in the first set. But I think in a lot of ways, Djokovic started defending better in the third and the fourth set than he even did in the first set, which I don't know why. Then I said there's a peak level. I don't want to say that Djokovic normalization is the last phase of the match, because I do think we entered a final phase where Alcaraz, when he was already down a break in the fourth set, actually started playing his best. I think he just recovered mentally from the strange situation that he was in, and he was rattled for a little while, frustrated for a while, and I think he snapped out of it. And Djokovic was able to hang on the rest of the way. They ended up playing really the highest quality of tennis of the match down the stretch of that fourth set, with Djokovic hanging on to tight service game after tight service game. I believe Novak's last 4 service games in a row got to 30 all. And many of them went to deuce, right? And he just held every single time. Let's get into some of the tactical themes. And we'll start with what I have felt is Novak's most basic path to victory against Alcaraz on a consistent basis, which is outserve and outsolid. And as I mentioned in the third set, he definitely outsolid. Fourth set as well. So unforced errors in the last 2 sets. This isn't my scoring. This is the official scoring. We're 20-6. So 20-6 were the unforced error count in 3 and 4. Now in the second set, Djokovic made more unforced errors, but as we discussed, this was Novak not really playing. This was him playing a completely different style. He's trying not to move. He's trying to play offense the whole time. In the third set, he changes that, and now he's not making any unforced errors. And then as for outserving, this actually played out a little bit differently than I thought, because Alcaraz did get plenty of free points, plenty of purchase on the first serve, as did Djokovic. It's really the second serve. The second serve return dynamic was very, very lopsided, and it was a slam dunk for Novak pretty much the whole match. This was a constant theme. So Alcaraz, first of all, he served a high percentage of first serves. Let me get the number here. He served 74%. But it's not pinpoint. Like, there's going to be a lot of Alcaraz first serves that are good. They're close to the line. They're going to be hard for Djokovic to return. Then there's going to be some first serves that they're very handleable. They're very manageable, because sure, Alcaraz has decent speed, but he doesn't have the kind of speed where he can miss a spot and not get punished by the greatest returner of all time. And we saw that a lot. So there were some missed spots on the first serve where Alcaraz was getting hurt off the return by Djokovic, and the brilliant depth that Novak can bring on a consistent basis off the return. Alcaraz couldn't make an adjustment here. What I would sometimes say is, if you're missing your spots, go for more on the first serve. That is always an option. But that option was not available to Alcaraz because his second serve was getting obliterated even worse and on a more regular basis. Alcaraz's second serve is a kick. He averages about 95 miles per hour on it, and he averaged 95 in this match, which is not slow. And there's a good amount of kick on it also. But it's in the middle of the box. It's pretty central in its location, and Djokovic was very dialed in as to, where he needed to stand and what the timing needed to be and how he needed to position himself in order to get the ball into his strike zone at an ideal contact point. So Novak was just really dialed into the second serve return. He could be aggressive off it on a regular basis. And it was, there was rhythm and there was predictability. So Alcaraz's second serve was getting destroyed. Djokovic's second serve was stellar. So Novak's first serve percentage was a little lower, especially because he missed a ton in the fourth set, where this became really important. Novak's first serve percentage ended up being 63%, but the second serve win percentage was 58% for Novak, and it was 33% for Carlos. So, okay, Djokovic's second serve, you get, first of all, sometimes him ramping up the speeds, like going hard into the body or hard into the forehand, breaking triple digits, being daring on the second serve. And Djokovic definitely went to that a couple times. And then sometimes he went to the precise slice serve, and he made Alcaraz move out to his forehand and stretch him out to his forehand on the second serve. He certainly did it on the first serve, plenty. But he has so much confidence and so much command of his slice serve that he can do it on the second and actually create really good width. And Alcaraz still had no answer for Djokovic's slice serve out wide on the deuce side. I didn't notice it as much on the ad, the slice T on the ad. I didn't think it was as much of a problem, but slice wide on the deuce, I was shocked after what happened at the Olympics that Alcaraz was no better this time. And to me, like, you have to take that away on the big points especially. And then if Djokovic started beating Alcaraz T, you clap your hands and you say, too good. But take away the serve that burned you on a consistent basis the last time you played, especially if it's been burning you all match here. And if I look at a game like 3-2 in the fourth set, it's 30-all. And this one I think was unreturnable. 30-all, Djokovic hits an ace on a wide serve, slice out wide. Then at deuce, second serve, slice wide, unreturned by Alcaraz, doesn't come back. Deuce again, deuce number 2, slice out wide, service winner, doesn't come back again. That was a first serve. Deuce number 3, second serve, slice out wide. Alcaraz doesn't make the return. And then add in, second serve, service winner into the body. And that one I don't want to focus as much on, but okay, we have 1, 2, 3, 4 deuce points in a row. It's a slice out wide, 4 in a row, and none of them come back. And that's the serve that crushed you when you last played the guy. So that to me was, I think from an Alcaraz like perspective, other than some mental stuff that we'll get to, that was the most frustrating part of the match. But it also is a really difficult serve to deal with. It's an elite slice serve out wide, and it's hard to take away. I think Alcaraz should have moved back on the second serve, because to me, he started playing better from the back of the court at this point in time. Let's make the second serve return if you're Alcaraz. So I do think he should have moved back, and he didn't. He never really adjusted his position. And I think the positional adjustment, you can talk about back or up, but for me, it's get over to the right. It's like just cut it off laterally by getting over to the right and make him beat UT. All right, so that was that with the serve return dynamic. Then you had big point clutchness that I think you have to talk about. It came through again for Djokovic. On serve, big point after big point. I mean, if this were Monday Match Analysis and not like a quick post-match reaction, I'm sure we'd dissect some of these in detail. But Novak just played the big points so incredibly well. For Alcaraz, I don't know that there were any massive mistakes on big points that really, really, really stood out. There was the massive shank on the inside-out forehand that went into the seats. That was at 1540. But Djokovic hit a strong cross-court backhand there with a lot of pace. And I actually liked the play by Alcaraz to be aggressive with his feet and to create the forehand. Obviously, you had also this epic breakpoint save by Alcaraz that would have been remembered. It was, I think, a 33-shot rally, super physical to save a breakpoint. That was an incredible point. And that would have been, first of all, I do think that changed the tone of the match and kind of snapped Alcaraz into a mode of being more willing to grind and just being tougher from the back of the court and getting more balls back under pressure when he had to defend a little bit or absorb quality. But Djokovic just hung tough. So I guess the point is, shout out to just how clutch Novak was again here, closing it out. I mean, he has been there before. He has ice in his veins. He came out of the gates nervous, but he was not nervous closing here at all. And if he were nervous, I think the point I really also want to make is Alcaraz found his level. End of the fourth set. He was ready to come back in this match. And Djokovic had to be great, and he couldn't get tight. And he did the job. I guess I just want to end on just digging a little bit more into the mental stuff for Alcaraz, because that's going to be a big storyline on his side. I have never heard a player say that it is easy to deal with an injured opponent. I've watched a lot. I've listened to a lot of tennis commentary in my day, okay? And I've talked to players in my day. I've never once heard like, yeah, it's very easy to manage mentally when your opponent is injured. That's a piece of cake. You never hear that. Why? Because first of all, for the player who is injured, it depressurizes them. And I mean, Novak talked about it after the match. It allows you to swing free, and it gives you clarity in terms of what you're trying to do, obviously offensively in most cases. So you become, like, almost all professionals become the most dangerous versions of themselves as a ball striker when they are hurt. But then on the other side, there's a couple of things that can happen. One, you let your guard down. Two, you inherit all the pressure to win the match. And there was a point in time where I'm sure in Alcaraz's head, he basically won. He was basically in the semifinals. Because it did look bleak for Djokovic. You just didn't know. You didn't know what he was going to have here when he's not running for balls. Or like, you didn't know how that was going to end. And then once you let your guard down and you inherit all the pressure to win the match, and it goes the other way. So now, like, it's double whammy. Suddenly you feel like I need to win the match, or I did win the match, and now it goes the other way. That is, that's rattling. And Alcaraz got upset because, I mean, look, it's obviously even harder and even worse when your opponent ends up recovering mid-match. And Novak got to the point where he was moving great. Now, I think, again, it was, you saw a couple things. You saw foot off the gas. That was mistake number one. You saw a lack of focus in the third set and just too much sloppiness and cloudiness, I think, in his intention. And then you saw, maybe at the start of the fourth, one other thing I want to say on this. Alcaraz should have left the court after the third set. Shout out John McEnroe for mentioning this, because I don't know if I would have really realized it in the moment. I don't know if that's just because I'm tired or what. But he should have left the court and given himself some time to regroup, because he was clearly pissed. I mean, he kind of mocked Djokovic a little bit at that time at the change of ends. At least I think he did. And then he got broken right away in the fourth set. It wasn't until that change of ends after the third game of the fourth where I thought Alcaraz accepted the situation and realized, look, in order for me to win, first of all, it is what it is. And in order for me to win, I need to play great. And it's not about, thinking about the whatever is going on with Novak anymore, or being frustrated about how the match turned around. Like, let's get back to the task at hand. And that's the first time that Djokovic started playing, Alcaraz got the crowd involved and used some positive energy, and I think just buckled down a whole lot more. But it did take a while. So there might be some real mental lessons for Alcaraz. I'm curious to hear what he says in press, but I'm guessing this is going to be one of those things where he looks at it and thinks, how do I make sure that when I'm in this situation again, I handle it very differently? With the caveat that Cincinnati was a similar story where Alcaraz had a physically compromised Djokovic up a set and a break, played a brutal game to let Novak back in, and then the sun went down, the temperature cooled, and Novak was much, much better physically, and suddenly Alcaraz had a dogfight on his hands. So, works both ways. I think it's a lesson, but you could also say it's one that he should have already learned. There's also the movement factor that I just want to mention before I wrap up. That's probably the biggest thing that surprised me. And again, in the first set, I do think Djokovic's movement looked a little bit outmatched by Alcaraz's firepower. But to defend the way he did against Alcaraz is a different level of impressiveness, and it's really, really important to see for Novak at this stage. You could say that he's been defending well all tournament. I don't care about that, and I agree, but it doesn't mean anything. You know, Mahach he played very passive, honestly, and Lehechka, he just hits hard. He doesn't come forward. He doesn't drop shot. He doesn't hit short angles. He just hits hard. So Alcaraz is a whole nother beast, a whole nother animal, and we saw that with some of the passing shots that Djokovic needed to execute, the drop shot retrievals that Djokovic needed to execute, how often he was pulled outside the single sidelines was, again, a little bit more than a normal opponent would be able to achieve. So I just think Novak responded after, in sets 3 and 4, really, really impressively with his defense, because the one thing that I did not expect to happen in this match was for Novak to steal so many points, and he did. Could Alcaraz have been a little bit more disciplined with the errors? Yes, but you know what? That's inherently a part of these guys' games. Djokovic is far less mistake prone, and it's going to stay that way. And once again, that was important. So that just about wraps up my thoughts. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.